there are absolutely infiltrators in the pro-white movement, in the alt-right movement. This is something that Cass Sunstein, a Jewish individual, wrote a whole paper about back in 2008 called Conspiracy Theories, where it said, this is the actual playbook. Here are 5 different methods for the government to go into these dissident groups and infiltrate them from within and erode them from within. And one of the tactics of that is by labeling each other feds. That's why it's called bad jacketing or fed jacketing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I highly suggest you guys look up Cass, C-A-S-S, Sunstein, and his paper written for the University of Chicago in 2008
I'm gonna
called
type that down.
Conspiracy Theories. I've done a whole episode about it before. It's remarkable where it says either we need to implant governmental officials, like formal government employees who are basically LARPing as pro-white individuals or people who have a problem with the Zog, and they go in and they collect information, whatever. Or they found out what actually works a lot easier to erode pro-white groups from within is to just go in and say, he's a Fed, you can't trust him. And the paranoia that we all have of being spied on, because we know that is happening, starts to hyper scrutinize each other. Where it's like at one point in time, this guy had a black friend, can't trust him. Oh, this guy, one of his family members is Mexican, one of his family members is a Jew, can't trust him. It's like an unsolvable problem that they have created, floating this idea where all they have to do is just give it a little bit of a nudge.
The destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Well, let me ask you this, dude. Do you think we're gonna vote our way out of this? Are you voting in the 2028 election? Do you know if you are yet?
My immediate gut reaction is no. I've actually never voted in an election in my life, and that's not
Oh, wow.
because I am obtuse, or it's not because I don't care. It's
It's not
because
because 'cause you're
I,
not educated, because obviously you are after hearing you speak tonight.
yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of like that's the effect of too much education. Is I
Yes.
feel like I know too
Uh,
much. The short answer there is that I don't believe in the current pay to play, blackmail fueled politics that we have in America, that the elections are even legitimate. I think
yeah.
what you see on TV, including, oh, they have to be real. Didn't you watch them count the ballots? I stayed up all night and I saw how many played out in every single state and the electoral college and all this other stuff. You think all that's just for show? It's all just theater? For the most part, yes. I genuinely do think that most of that is theater, and it is for the intent of accumulating believability, plausibility. A good example of this was the Trump shooting last year. His redemption arc, if you remember, he was not a very what's the right word? Harmonizing figure throughout his first presidency.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
To put it lightly, you wear a hat that said you voted for Donald Trump and people wanted to kill you. And even the Republican Party, the GOP, they didn't want Trump to run in 24. Remember, they tried to put up Ron DeSantis. And so when he had his near death experience, if you believe that's what happened, some people say other conspiracy theories. I'm open minded to that. Um, I think that that was probably a orchestrated theatrical display to create plausibility for this inevitability that, okay, now he deserves a vote. We can all believe now, after this witch hunt of the files and all of these sexual rape allegations, and now somebody just nearly tried to kill him. It's believable now that Donald Trump would actually have this triumphant comeback and he would secure the presidency in 24. I think that's a lot of what you see is just accumulating believability so that the people stay in the sandbox of the two-party system where they are presented a couple of pre-groomed, usually blackmailed or financially compromised in other ways figures as an illusion that they actually have some kind of participation in our government, the so-called democracy that we have. I just don't believe any of it. And when you have your own president saying that he doesn't believe the elections are accurate, okay, that's not helping. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like,
yeah, you're not pleading a good case there.
right. And so it's like, okay. how are we supposed to believe any of this at this point? And there's a lot of people who don't like that position. They think it's too black pilled. They think that it has to be a political solution. And the way we express our political values is through democracy and voting and nominating the right individuals. Um, I just don't see it, frankly, not in the current structure where governmental pursuits are entirely financially driven. What would be required for me to actually vote?
Yeah.
I would need to see a candidate, it's a figurehead, who is embodying the America First principles, and they are unapologetic in identifying America First to mean America is a European Christian country, and therefore our leaders must be white Christian individuals, at least at the majority status. Maybe it's unrealistic to expect 100%. Maybe we should establish something a little bit more precise and say 8 out of 10, 7, 9, how many ever, but majority of our leadership of each of the big four civil institutions I mentioned, they got to be white Christians because those are the people who built the country and it's our inheritance. Nobody else can replicate it. If they had, you would see civilizations like America and Europe all over the world, but we don't. So we're going to use some common sense here and say that it's not because we hate people of other religions or other ethnicities or nationalities, but this is our country. It was stood up on the two shoulders that were evangelization of the mission of Jesus Christ and his offer of salvation for all people, tied inextricably to European culture. And if those were the shoulders that went undisturbed, by the way, for 350 of the first 400 years of this country's existence, 1600 all the way to 1960, America was a 90% white country, 90% Christian. And that's verifiable through the United States Census Bureau and through Gallup polls and other religious participation surveys. And so we got to get back to common sense and saying there was a clear formula that was even codified at the governmental level in terms of our ethnic demographics. We had immigration policy before the Hart-Celler Act in 1965 that said if you want to come to America, the 9 out of 10, if not more, must be from Western European countries. Okay. We actually didn't even want Eastern European countries here because of the Red Scare and we were scared about communists. And implicitly within that is saying we don't really want Africans and we don't want Central and South
Mhm.
Americans and we don't want Asians and we don't want Indians and we don't necessarily want Jews. We want people from Europe because most often they are also Christian. And that was the law of the land from 1600 all the way through 1960. And so if we see America establishing a clear hegemonic state over the entire world, just go back to the 60s. America was the most powerful country in the world, economically, militarily, culturally. We were the culture makers for the whole world,
Yeah.
technologically advanced. You should question how we got there. What were the ingredients? Who were the people? What did they believe? Okay, if that was the success formula, 90% Christian, 90% white, why disturb the formula? Why don't we make that the new, or I should say, reinvigorated North Star of America? And sure, maybe we can't get back to 90% white, and maybe to think that our country being 50% Christian, that we can get back to 90% Christian again, maybe that's not going to happen in our lifetimes. But we have to be okay with that. The arc of history is very, very long. Countries have had revivals of the faith, and countries have been ethnically diversified, but then purged before. So these things can happen, but it's going to take multiple generations. And so to tie it back to what I would have to see in terms of formal politics and presidential platforms, I'd have to see a president say, I am America first. And what I mean by that, because there are many people who are trying to skin suit the America First movement, who are trying
Mhm.
to say, I'm Ron DeSantis and I'm America First, except I'm taking checks from Israel. Like, okay, no, you're not America First. They would have to define America First to mean that this is a Christian European nation. We're going to watch out and preserve at any means necessary the white majority and the Christian faith of this country. I'd like to see an immigration moratorium,
Yeah.
maybe with the caveat that says, if you're white and you want to move here, that's fine too. But no non-white people. And I don't give a fuck who that offends. I'm not going to say no global south or whatever else. I'm going to say
Yeah.
if you're not European, then you can't come to our country, at least for the next 10 years. Maybe at some point in the future when we've repaired our birth rates and we've purged many of the 140, 150 million non-white people from the country. And I'll add a disclaimer there because that can be a little offensive and taken the wrong way. I'm not saying we need to remove the 40 42% of the country who are not white. I'm not saying we need to airdrop them somewhere else
No, speak for
because
yourself.
well,
Sorry, sorry.
no, I bring this up because it's actually topical. I was just seeing
It
today
is,
that
man.
Arvil, if for those who know who Arvil is, who leads
Return
Return
to
to
the
the
land.
Land.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he and Nick Fuentes are beefing about the subject of birthright citizenship, and some people took Nick out of context and implied that Nick was okay with birthright citizenship. If you're a Mexican and you come here and you have a baby, then boom, that baby is automatically an American citizen, and they're just as owed every right as all other Americans are. That's not what Nick believes. That's not what Nick has ever believed, and that's not what he advocates for. So there is some miscommunication there. Um, what subject were we talking? Oh, the general
Yeah,
nature at hand.
yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the situation though is I see this a lot from the so-called Wignat community, Wigger nationalists, white nationalists. They're not the same. I'm just saying that's what the community may be called to some people. They genuinely think that there is a realistic possibility of taking all non-white people and removing them from America. Okay, but that's 140, 150 million people. And so, like, dude, I feel a little surprised that I have to remind people that a population movement of that size has never happened in history. And so, if you think that somehow that's a realistic scenario and that somehow you would do that without massive casualties on both sides, you
Both
might say,
sides.
oh, I don't care how many of them die. Okay, fine. Guess how many of you are going to die too, though? And so the realistic conversation we should be having is something much more embodied by American Renaissance and Jared Taylor that talks about freedom of association and re-legalizing segregation, where we say segregation is not a dirty word. We all segregate in our own lives. Our friend groups are intentional circles drawn where we keep certain people in and certain people out, and they're on certain grounds. And so to say that if white people want to have white communities, they want their kids to grow up around other white neighbors. They want to go to exclusively white schools, whatever, is commonly talked about in pro-white communities, then that's just as moral and right as if a black person says, I prefer my black kids to be around other black kids because they're black and that's who they feel in their own skin with. Likewise, I would only want to marry a black person because I want black children. That's how most black people feel. It's only white people who have been emotionally guilt tripped into thinking that that's some kind of offensive remark to make, or even worse, an offensive preference to have internally. Heaven forbid you express it externally. And so the conversation that I want to see our America First hopeful future leader say is this is going to hurt some people's feelings, but we're bringing segregation back. Okay. You
Attaboy.
guys think you're so capable and equal to us in terms of building civilizations and maintaining them? Well, we've never seen that happen before,
I'm
but
still waiting for Wakanda, dude. I am still waiting.
well, go check on Liberia, go check on Ethiopia, Haiti,
Yeah.
which pick,
Doesn't
doesn't matter.
Liberia have our same constitution?
They do. Yeah, they were
So what
gifted.
why the heck aren't they America? Well,
Uh,
who knows?
according to some mainstream GOP people who think that the Constitution somehow creates out of thin air law-abiding, intelligent, hardworking, ethical Christians. Turns out it's not the case because we gave that
Yeah,
very same doctrine to Liberia and we even carved out land for them and we sent people over there in its utter civilizational collapse. So, that's a whole different story about why
yeah.
African nations look the way they do. But this is what I would have to see in order to actually garner my vote would be somebody seriously standing up for saying, I care so much about the white majority and protecting it that I think part of the necessity of that protection is letting them segregate. I'm not saying we all have to, but
Not
I'm saying,
forcing, but allowing.
yeah, that's the verbiage of freedom of association. And that Jared Taylor is so beautifully eloquent. I don't know how much of his content you've seen, but I mean, it is a masterclass. He's actually one of the major figures that Nick received his education from in terms of how to morally stand up for white people as best as you possibly can. There's always going to be people who uncharitably, no matter what, have bad intentions and just don't like you for whatever reason. But he is a very soft spoken old man, Yale graduate, And I've watched, I don't even know how many hundreds of hours of his public speeches where he goes to a all black college campus and talks about how we have to bring segregation back, you guys. And
Mhm.
he's just so good at it that by the end of it, he even has the black people saying, like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with preferring your own. So
Yeah,
what if you
and
guys want to live separate?
correct. And in realistically, if you look at tribalism and that culture throughout the centuries, etc., you will find more often than not, whether you're white or blacks in particular, since we're talking about them, they behave better and they learn better and they prosper in society better financially and or otherwise when they are together. They
Mm,
actually and they're not inflicted by the eternal welfare state that they're given
yeah.
free handouts without any interference. An Americanized black, they can behave in their own society. It's sort of a just as I respect my fellow whites, don't take that out of context or look into it too far. But just as I respect fellow white people, they respect fellow black people. So if I'm a minority and I'm out there and I'm surrounded by a bunch of people that don't look like me, yeah, I'm gonna feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I might act a little rash. I might me being white, I might have more aptitude to resist the impulse control genetically and or otherwise. However, we all behave better whenever we are with our own people, and I think
Mhm.
that yields to a happier society. So I do agree with you there. But dude, we brought up and I kind of already got the gist of it just from watching a little bit of your content, but what is your what is your general opinion of Nick Fuentes since he's a hot topic, man? He is the hot topic. Do you have a overall good opinion of him or an overall negative, or is it kind of neutral? Where do you stand with Nick right now?
Meeting the people that you actually want to meet this day and age is basically impossible. Well, I have a solution to these problems. You're wearing your anti-Zog merchandise, that cutie from across the gym. She knows what the Zog is. She knows that Save Europa is code for white genocide. Or if it's somebody of the same gender, boom, you just got yourself a new best friend. This is your opportunity. Everybody's always complaining about how hard it is to find people who know what's really going on. Well, this is it. This is how you broadcast those beliefs to the world.
Unapologetically positive. I would say he is by far the most articulate and educated, charismatic, pro-white person that any of us have seen in our generation. And I say that even after just talking about Jared Taylor. So
Yeah.
if you're pro-white, you've been in the space for a while, you should have a lot of respect for Jared Taylor because that guy endured 30 years of cancellation while Nick was still swimming around his dad's testicles. So I mean, this guy paid far more for Nick and laid down the red carpet and even personally helped educate Nick to create the person that Nick is today. But unfortunately, Jared is an old man. He's not social media savvy. He
Yeah.
hasn't grown up in the same era. And Nick obviously had the benefit of that, starting from early teenagehood, getting on with podcasting and doing debates. So the fact that Nick, in my opinion, is so obviously intellectually gifted, not just with high intelligence, because there's plenty of people who are highly intelligent and they can problem solve, but they're not articulate. You know, you see this all the time with like software developers and other people who
Yes.
can do fascinating things, solve problems I can't solve. But then when you ask them, can you explain what you just did? It's much it doesn't come across like they can't explain things in layman's terms, and they don't have the same level of human to human
Correct.
relation, right? And so articulation is a fully separate gift that is somewhat of a, or I should say, intelligence is a prerequisite for articulation, but you don't always receive both. And he has received both. And he has received the two most important forms of education, which are white genocide and Jewish influence. And the fact that he is a devout Catholic, which is something that not many people like, even other Christians don't like it, much less all the pagans and whatnot.
Yes.
Well, the benefit of that is that he is chaste. He doesn't have a sordid current sexual life, nor historical ex girlfriends who are going to leak various footage and leak text messages and blackmail him through those avenues. And I know people say he's gay and all this other stuff, which if you've actually tuned into his show and heard him rebut some of those topics that come up, people say he's Mexican because his grandfather was Mexican. So he's, one fourth Mexican. There's a lot
Yeah,
of
something
ankle.
like 13% according to his ancestry or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think what is the litmus test is what Jesus taught us, which is obviously the cornerstone we should always fall back on. If we're confused, who should we trust? How do I examine this person's character? The biblical teaching for Christians is you judge a tree by its fruit. Who else has accumulated the same fruit that Nick has in terms of reaching an audience and awareing them first that it is happening, that white genocide is real, not to use a pun there, but
Israel. Oh.
yeah. I hate when that happens because it's so corny and obvious, but it's unintentional. Like,
Did he say Israel or Israel?
yeah.
No, I
So,
got you.
I mean, like when you go and have a conversation with a boomer, they're like, "Yeah, I'm not sure about that. There's plenty of white people around." I'm like, no, okay,
Like dwindling numbers, brother.
yeah,
Put down the prune juice and wake up.
yeah. So, establishing first and foremost that white genocide is real and not a conspiracy theory, as Wikipedia currently defines it as. He has done tremendous things, as much as Europa, as much as Jared Taylor, in my opinion, more than anybody else in terms of his audience, his persistence, his ability to explain it is just unmatched. And then, probably more complex and more difficult to describe, is the scope of the Jewish problem. Having the historical receipts and the current receipts of knowing every single president of every Ivy League school and knowing all of the talent agency owners and knowing all the Hollywood film studio owners, knowing the origins of each of the uh, cultural Marxist social movements, whether it's feminism, the push for LGBT, you can memorize all these things over time. But the guy has like an encyclopedic knowledge of
Yes.
dates and times of people's names, of wars, especially the wars in the Middle East, and his pulse that he has on the geopolitical situation, not just with Israel and America, but worldwide. It's not that he has a crystal ball, but the guy just devotes so much time to it because it's a personal hobby that he enjoys. It's not a job. He's been doing this stuff when he was not paid to do this when he was in high school. So him having done all this geopolitical work and staying on the newswire for 10 years makes him an such a formidable opponent for any of these live debates. It's gotten to a point where the reason he's not invited to go on certain shows is because people know they will lose. Like
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro won't talk to him because he knows he will lose. And Matt Walsh, and the same with anyone else who wants to try to portray a pro-Israel stance. You're only seeing Nick now get invited to people to talk about being critical of Israel from people who have established already that there's a problem with Israel. Tucker Carlson's finally reached that point,
Yeah,
and
he's
Glenn
easing into
Greenwald.
it.
Yeah, so and Glenn Greenwald has already, I mean, not already, he's has a long his track record of that, and Dave Smith and other individuals who are now okay with talking about Israel, and perhaps there's too much influence. He's not being invited. What you still haven't seen is a one-on-one debate with Nick, the anti-Zionist, and anybody who is pro-Zionist, because they literally know they will lose. And the same is true on the ethnic conversation as well, where he simply advocates for white people. If you want to have some black supremacist or whoever else come and present their argument for how black people invented everything and we owe it to them or whatever else, he's not getting those invitations because they'll just get utterly crushed and humiliated. It'll end their careers. So I think the naysayers, the doubters, the Fed jacketers who say he's a Fed, the ankle biters who say he's gay and Mexican and all this other stuff, it depends on per individual what their motivation is for doing that. There are absolutely infiltrators in the pro-white movement, in the alt-right movement. This is something that Cass Sunstein, a Jewish individual, wrote a whole paper about back in 2008 called Conspiracy Theories, where it said, this is the actual playbook. Here are 5 different methods for the government to go into these dissident groups and infiltrate them from within and erode them from within. And one of the tactics of that is by labeling each other feds. That's why it's called bad jacketing or fed jacketing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I highly suggest you guys look up Cass, C-A-S-S, Sunstein, and his paper written for the University of Chicago in 2008
I'm gonna
called
type that down.
Conspiracy Theories. I've done a whole episode about it before. It's remarkable where it says either we need to implant governmental officials, like formal government employees who are basically LARPing as pro white individuals or people who have a problem with the ZOG, and they go in and they collect information, whatever. Or they found out what actually works a lot easier to erode pro white groups from within is you just go in and say, he's a Fed, you can't trust him. And the paranoia that we all have of being spied on, because we know that is happening, starts to hyper scrutinize each other. Where it's like at one point in time, this guy had a black friend, can't trust him. Oh, this guy, one of his family members is Mexican, one of his family members is a Jew, can't trust him. It's like an unsolvable problem that they have created, floating this idea where all they have to do is just give it a little bit of a nudge. And Nick has talked a great length about this on his platform. There was a formal financed campaign called hashtag Fed Fuentes by a company called Influenceable,
Yep.
where some wealthy individual went to this company Influenceable and said, here's enough money to pay influencers to create tweets and Instagram posts and etc. And mention these specific bullet points about why we think Nick Fuentes is a Fed. He didn't get arrested at January 6th. He received this suspicious donation of how many ever hundreds of thousands of dollars in Bitcoin. He says his bank account was frozen. He says he was on the federal no-fly list, but he can't provide proof. They list these different bullet points, all of which Nick has thoroughly debunked during his shows.
Yes.
The problem is that requires you to watch a show that's 2 hours long every night. And they know nobody's going to want to do that, or most people won't do that. And so they're just going to see a tweet that says, sure is suspicious. Nick didn't get arrested when he said, yes, let's go storm the Capitol, but other people got arrested. And they won't actually go and click down into the multiple layers beneath that to see why he
Correct.
wasn't charged. So that's a very long answer, but I see Nick as the unquestioned and deserving leader of America First, the most effective advocate for white people and Christian nationalism, if you want to call it that, or simply protecting the Christian moral foundation of our country. I don't think there's anybody better in the game right now.
Yeah, and I can agree to that. Out of all of the people who are pro-white, pro-Christian, Christian nationalist, Nick is the most prominent, and he is the most public, and he has the most pull. And guess what, dude? I am a product of Nick Fuentes. I never really said, "Hey, I'm a groiper," but, I discovered him through watching Elijah Schaffer, and then he was on one of Elijah's shows, and then I got into him before he got banned and got on Cozy TV.
Mhm.
But I still to this day, whenever I don't catch the live streams because I go to bed at a reasonable hour, but I'll put them on 1.25 speed whenever I'm getting ready for work, put them in my pocket, and there you go. That's the way I start my mornings. Um, but he does have that intelligence and that articulation. You can't take that away from him, not whatsoever. Little side note there, I knew this one guy, right? He was a we won't go into too many details, but he was an engineer where I worked at. He's no longer employed there. Not a bad looking dude, a young, fit dude. Him and I would hit the gym, he'd do cardio, making a decent chunk of change he was too. And the guy couldn't get a girl. He was hyper intelligent. He wasn't ugly. He wasn't like a little short guy, but he just didn't have the means to articulate. So to have that talent, that is really unrivaled talent, and just putting in the years and years and years of work that he has to get there. Um, I think just from being in my little circles with some of the wig nats and etc. Um, I think the biggest gripes that I hear about Nick specifically, just like you said, they'll say, "Well, he's a Fed because blah blah blah," and I'm like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it because there's no evidence." Um, and then a lot of people will gripe about the fact that he does kind of shit on blue collar workers.
Mhm.
My thought process behind that is that he wants to make blue collar workers, to the young audience who he's trying to rise up, he wants to make them seem as not the end goal. Not that they're terrible people, but hey, if you can be a doctor or a lawyer or make a shitload of money, why not do that instead? Um, but he does it's I think the problem with the far right, the alt-right, whatever you wanna say is because 'cause I'm in it and I feel this way. Sometimes I'm, like, listening to Nick in the morning, I'm like, "Dude, you're so gay." I'll say out loud whenever he says he doesn't wanna work out or he just wants to sit and order pizza or he says he likes musicals. It's like, "Okay, dude, whatever." But, it's we're all searching for that perfect we're all searching for our Fuhrer. We're all searching for that
Mhm,
perfect guy to lead us out of the muck and mire and get out there and take back America all in 1 year, and we're gonna all live in happy land. This is a years-long process.
mhm,
Um, and I think that's why you're seeing guys like yourself and me come onto the scene because not only do we wanna spread the message, but we want to let people know that there's more than just Nick Fuentes that feels this way, and there's more than just Josh and Adam that feel this way. We are growing in numbers, and you guys out there, we're not crazy, and you're not crazy. If you're like Josh said at the beginning of this, if you guys are finding yourself in a situation to where people in your personal life are belittling you or discounting you because you hold these very real truths throughout your life, you might want to reevaluate yourself, but I'd say never stop pushing forward. Um, I don't hate Nick to tie it back in. I don't hate Nick. I think he is currently an asset. He's definitely an asset. I'd be a fool to say he wouldn't be. Show me I've talked to one of my very close friends about this. Show me another option out there that is bringing awareness to white sovereignty and white Christian nationalism as much as Nick. And yes, guys, I know he's a Mexican. I know he talked to that cop behind his house whenever he almost got shot. And he's like, "I'm Mexican. But we have to be why are we the same people bitching about infighting are the same ones saying, "Hey, Nick, you suck ass. You suck because of this, that, and the third." Well, guys, okay, if you believe that, then go ahead and go out there and make a change, make something happen. You don't have to start your podcast, but start something in real life, whether it's the self-discipline that we talked about throughout this episode or activism in your own life. I'm in connection with a few activist groups, not directly tied to any, but I know a lot of guys out there doing a lot of good things. And it's easier than you think, you just gotta get up off the couch and do it. Um, can you relate to that at all here?
Oh, absolutely. And it's unrewarding at first. And if you think that the rewards are quickly going to come in terms of making an impact, I mean, personal fulfillment is completely different. Waking up every day, knowing that you're at least trying, you make a social media post talking about white genocide or Jewish influence and it gets 2 likes. You're like, okay, well, what the fuck was the point of that?
I've been
Uh,
there.
yeah. And, well, guess where my platform started with 2 likes, with 100 different followers. And that was it. And it is a long, long game that we are playing. We didn't get into this situation overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. One of the problems that you mentioned or kind of alluded to is the purity spiraling
Yes.
over everybody trying to find the Fuhrer who's going to be perfect and embodying this white population that we have who don't even share a common faith at this
Yeah.
point.
What I
Much of
want,
the
not what you want, what I want.
Yeah. And so it's like, what would you rather? Would you rather a Protestant? Okay, well, the Catholics are gonna have a problem with that. Do you want a Catholic? Well, they're the Protestants. Did I say it backwards? If you
No,
want a
you said it
Catholic,
right.
yeah, so it's like, okay, well, Nick can't be our leader because America's a Protestant country and he's Catholic and he wants a Catholic monarchy. So he's not the right guy. Even though he's pro-white, even though he's sacrificed enormously for 10 years, sorry, we just can't trust him because he's probably beholden to the Pope and he wants to institute a Catholic New World Order. It's like, all right, well, that's not helping the pro-white movement when you say we can't trust Nick because he's a Catholic. Let's just say myself as a Protestant came about. Well, all the Catholics in America would say, well, unfortunately, he's not fit to lead the pro white movement because he has a heretical interpretation of what the true church is. He's not Catholic. Okay. Then you have the matter of ethnic background, where Jared Taylor refers to this as the eyeball test, the common sense test, or the man on the street test. Is Nick Fuentes white? A lot of people are saying he's Mexican. Does he fucking look like a Mexican?
No.
Okay. You know, like seriously, if he goes and walks down Mexican Alley. I don't know the names of these places, but are they really going to say, "Come on in, my fellow beaner"? Obviously not. And so that's one of those things that's just obviously said about him in bad faith, whether that's out of jealousy or personally wanting to undermine the movement as a subversive actor. Who knows why? But those who throw around, oh, the fact that he's a quarter Mexican or whatever, it's like, okay, this shit is just completely irrelevant. There isn't going to be the 100% Aryan Christian of the right denomination, even if you said, okay, he has to be Protestant. Oh, well, the Methodists aren't going to like the fact that it's a Baptist. Okay. So it's like at some point, you all need to shut the fuck up and say, let's look at the fruit. Let's look at who actually has movement and is delivering major wins for us. And so in my case, it's like I've gone out and I filmed 6 independent documentaries. I have 2,500 posts on Instagram. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been fired from my job. I've invested a huge chunk of my life savings. I've lost family member, friends. I'm happy to sit down and talk to anybody, use my personal time to do this. Judge a tree or judge an individual by the fruit that they grow in the same way you judge a tree by the fruit that they grow. And Nick is an obvious example of that to me. There isn't going to be, as I said, the perfect Aryan 100% specimen of the right Christian denomination, who, by the way, never had any kind of sordid past. They never did anything wrong that can be used against him. Right? They didn't take money from the wrong person. They didn't have the wrong friend who may have been homosexual. They've never once had a black friend who they actually appreciated. It's like, what are the realistic expectations for this future Führer that the Wignat community thinks is going to be bestowed upon us? Let's be realistic. Let's look at the options that we have, judge a tree by its fruit, and actually do something to help rather than ankle biting.
Yeah, man. I think tonight was a really good conversation. You brought the heat. Um, are you ready for a few lightning round questions?
Let's do it, man.
All
Let
right,
me.
dude.
Can I say a prayer real quick? I don't want this to
Go
be
ahead.
a
No, I'll pray with you.
complete
Let's do it.
disaster. Well, Lord, please just speak through me. Allow me to speak nothing but the truth as best as I understand it, at least. And please bless Adam and his followers for giving us the opportunity to talk through some of these subjects tonight. I know they're controversial and we don't expect everybody to agree with everything that we say. The same is true for everyone out there doing this work. We ask that you provide the protection and the providence to all of the modern day saints and prophets and martyrs of our time who are out there trying to defend your kingdom, that you would provide grace to us as we are all imperfect and striving in protecting your kingdom. In the Lord of Jesus' name we pray, amen. Go
Amen.
ahead, brother.
Dude, that was awesome. All right. Joshua, I need you to answer these as quick as possible and succinctly as you can. If one of them piques my interest, your answers, I will go ahead and refer back to them. All right, here we go. First question: should women be allowed to vote?
No.
Attaboy. Michelle Obama or Big Mike?
Big Mike, clearly.
Oh, weird choice.
Well,
Anyway,
hold on.
was it
Well,
was it
what
six
is the question
million?
here? Is it who?
No further explanation.
Okay, okay. I hope that wasn't a setup.
No, it wasn't. I'm just messing, man. No. Anyway, final question. Was it 6,000,000?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, dude, that was good. No, I planned the Michelle Obama or Big Mike one. I thought that'd get a laugh, but, yeah,
I would
like I said go ahead.
I would assume that question was what is the true identity? And the true identity is clearly Big Mike.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
But no matter how you answered, I was just gonna bust your balls, so that worked
Okay.
out.
Well
Yes,
done.
yes, sir. Um, thanks for praying with me, and,
Oh yeah.
thanks for coming on, man. That was really fun. I know that our guys are going to really enjoy this. Guys, hey, if you stuck around this long, please leave a comment. If you guys want to say, "Hey, Adam, Josh, you guys missed the mark," or "You guys are awesome," leave us a comment down below. I will respond to everything that you guys send. Our affiliate links are all going to be down below. Josh, what platforms do you want our viewers tonight to support you the most at? Name a few, the most important ones you're trying to grow.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to plug a few. The headquarters, so to speak, is Instagram. That's where we have 112, I think, thousand followers. There's 2,500 posts going back minimum 5 years, 10 years if you want to see some fitness content too on there. That's our large, headquarters. And then more recent, we've been trying to put more time into building up the YouTube. I think we're at 5,000 subscribers there. So just search for Beholden to Truth on YouTube. We also have Rumble as a failsafe. Pretty difficult because there's not a lot of traffic going to Rumble in general, but we're slowly building a following over there, around 1,000 followers. I'm not active as a contributor on Twitter. I have a Twitter, but I don't really post very often there, simply because you guys running a platform of this size, it's pretty hard to manage this many different social media platforms, respond to all the comments, read the DMs. So I am on Twitter, but I don't use it often. But actually, I think that's how you reached out to me,
Yeah,
was
Twitter
via
takes
Twitter
a
DM.
it takes a lot of time, besides the scrolling, finding a post, posting at the perfect time, like, to get the algo on X, it does take a little time, but
Yeah, so there's the Twitter that exists but isn't used much, and then the last social media platform would be Substack, and so that's where I actually published all of my long format conversations, especially interviews, in uncut, unedited fashion. It's an exclusive privilege there. They both drop early and they drop uncut on Substack, as well as my long format documentaries, which I mentioned before. I think I have 6 of them. The first one being "Is Racism a Sin?" That was kind of my big splash on the scene. And then I had America and Israel, Jesus and Judas. That was a fun one to make, which I recently republished as a director's cut. The Serenity, or the Serene Rights of Manhood, I think, was my third documentary, which was less controversial because it wasn't talking about Jewish influence and pro-white, blah 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 blah. It was about my path and evolution as a man and embracing some of the most important priorities. I think I had 10 to 12 of them that I think are the perfect formula for any young man coming up now. Is the serene rights of manhood. These are the things you got to be able to check off, one of which is your relationship with Jesus Christ. So, anyways, I have a number of different documentaries that are exclusive on my Substack, as well as all my weekly vlogs come out uncut over there as well. So, it is your choice: Substack, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram. Follow me on all of them if you really enjoyed this interview. And the last one, I guess I should plug my own merchandise, right?
oh,
Uh,
yeah,
if you
beholdentotruth.com, dude.
That's right. That's where the merch shop is. So you can go and get yourself something from the Save Europa line or the Anti-Zog line. I mentioned before: hoodies, tank tops, sleeveless t-shirts, flip-flops, water bottles, cell phone case. Sounds a little merchant like, but at the end of the day, this is funny. One last thing to say about
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
because as soon as I created a merch store, like literally the second that I did it, you get the Jewish stuff, you get the, "Oh, you're selling out. Oh, you're only
Oh, he's
doing all of
shilling.
this stuff to shill. You're only doing it all to make a shekel." And it's like, how else do you think political movements succeed? You understand they have to have backing and like capital, and people have to live. And in my case, when I get fired from my job for doing this work, you know, no matter what political movement you ever look at historically, they all had financial backing, and that financial backing didn't grow from grass in the ground. It went from enterprising entrepreneurial endeavors. I don't have angel investors dumping tons of money into me. So we got to make some merch. But I mentioned before that the merch isn't just fueling the growth of the platform, it's helping you meet the people you want to meet actually out there in the real world, kick off some of those conversations. So it would mean a lot to me if you guys grab yourself some of the aesthetic anti-Zog or Save Europa stuff.
Yeah, here in the near future, guys, expect me to be wearing some anti-Zog merch on the show because why not, dude? Why not
Yeah.
support our brothers? But like I said, man, it was a great time having you tonight. And guys, go ahead, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And thank you again. This has been another episode of Mainstream Dissident. My name is Adam. I've been your host. And until next time.
The few brave men who have actually tried to go out and do something about white genocide or talk about Jewish influence, the Zionist occupied government, we all know that they get crucified, their careers get destroyed, and so we need to find ways to support each other. One of the ways that I have done that is by creating my Substack, where there are exclusive early access to documentaries, my weekly vlogs. There are ebooks there. There's even an opportunity to set up a one-on-one 30-minute Ask Me Anything if you'd like. All of the proceeds from my Substack, from my YouTube channel, from the merch gets reinvested in the platform. I use that to pay my employees. I use that to buy the equipment that I need, the cameras, the lights, the MacBook, all the books, all of the software, pay for marketing, everything else, but also it protects my literal life. So if you want to help out, please do head on to Substack, get yourself a subscription. Thank you. I appreciate it. America first and Christ is King.